to our long divided country.
There was a feeling of unity and healing, and I think that was brought about by our leader, President Donald Trump. He's being a healer-in-chief.
Everyone watched as the Democratic team and the Republican team all headed out to second base to take a knee and pray on the spot where Congressman Steve Scalise would have been standing tonight.
And as I was sitting out there for the national anthem, you know, we had the Capitol Police officer throw the first pitch. We're doing, saluting the flag. I looked down the line. Half those guys wouldn't have been there if it weren't for the Capitol Police.
Russia taking credit for killing the leader of ISIS.
Otto had been terrorized and brutalized for 18 months by a pariah regime in North Korea.
Do I think the past administration could have done more? I think the results speak for themselves.
But in just a few hours, the president expected to unveil a new policy in Miami, rolling back Obama-era policies with Cuba.
I leave you with three great American words: let's play ball.
Southern born and free. I got sweet home Alabama buzzing all around in my head. I got a home in Georgia. I ride a home in Georgia, down in Carolina. I'd be happy any place below the Michigan-Dixon line. Well, I'm working in the sweat till I hear the whistle blow. Got that country rock cooking on my pickup radio. Rush home for a shower, put on my dancing shoes. I get the Friday fever and the Sunday morning blues. And I'm a Southern boy. I like a rowdy crowd. Put my sheets on the jukebox, turn that sucker well loud. Don't need a reservation. Don't need a reservation. We're just having fun. Well, it's party time in Dixie. Y'all just come on down and get some.
59 years he's been in the singing business, and Charlie Daniels is our All-American Summer Concert Series performer with Southern Boy here on our plaza, brought to you this year by Cura.
May God grant us all that energy at the age of 80.
Yeah, he says he's a Southern boy. They like rowdiness, he says. Southern boys are the best. My daddy's a Southern boy.
I'm a Northern boy. That's why we don't get along as well as we should.
You'll have to keep watching our show. We're going to have lots of music from Charlie Daniels. You can also watch him perform online.
That's right. Go to foxandfriends.com, and you'll see the whole show as we stream live. Meanwhile, let's go on out to Chicago, and Fox News roaming correspondent at large, Geraldo Rivera, is in the Windy City, appropriately.
I am indeed.
Yeah, I understand, Geraldo, you are a big Charlie Daniels fan.
Oh, terrific. Charlie actually did a benefit concert. Charlie Daniels and his band, and my friend, the recently departed Greg Allman and the Allman Brothers Band, did a benefit for my Willowbrook concert to help disabled children.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
It was Nassau Coliseum, the old Nassau Coliseum. They jammed the place. We made $250,000, which was real money back in 1975, but it really, he's such a good-hearted man.
Sure.
That's why it's always a delight to see him when he comes on the stage at Fox and Friends. He's such a wonderful, wonderful, charitable person.
Right.
And my goodness, look at him. We're both still rocking.
He said he's 80 years old.
That's great.
Well, I'm not that old, but I love him, and he still looks good. He still plays a mean fiddle.
Sure. And speaking of charity events, last night's congressional baseball game, actually, historically, it has raised money for a lot of charities, and I think they raised north of $1 million last night. Geraldo, for one day, at least, it seemed, Washington, D.C. came together after the awful shooting out in Alexandria. It started with the very emotional prayer around second base where Steve Scalise was the second baseman, and of course he's still in the hospital. What's your observation about where we go from here?
Well, that, Steve, to me was a bittersweet moment. Bitter, obviously, because of the grievous injury suffered by Congressman Scalise, and we're all praying for him as he completed his third surgery. Also bitter that the tone, rhetoric politically could lead to such horrific violence. Sweet that everybody came together and talked of, more civility in public life. I hate to say it, though, but it just seems to me that once this moment is past, with Mueller, with the special counsel's continuing probe, with all the sniping going on, with all of the crossfire, I'm not quite sure that this moment, this beautiful moment, will come to characterize the foreseeable future.
Geraldo, is the left being introspective enough? No one's blaming anybody for the violence. The shooter is the only one to blame for that. But there's been so much vitriol, so much hate of this president. Are their leadership doing enough to say, enough is enough, let's disagree, but let's do so in a way that actually is civil?
Well, that's a great question, Pete. I think that Nancy Pelosi's tone and the, certainly surrounding the shooting, excuse me, and the ball game, and so forth, that was good. But I wish that it happened earlier. Now, I know that people point to the Shakespeare in the Park, Julius Caesar, as Donald Trump as Julius Caesar being knifed to death, and Kathy Griffin holding up the decapitated head of what is obviously Donald Trump, as causing some of this this anger that leads to violence. I think rather those artistic expressions are a symptom of the great divide that exists in this country. And never in my public life, half a century now, have I seen the nation quite as divided. Maybe Congressman Scalise's trauma and tragedy can help heal some of this grand chasm that exists between right and left right now. I fear, however, that as this probe goes forward, and as it expands, and as it metastasizes and brings in more and more people, more and more issues, now it's going to be, the tax returns of the president, Jared Kushner's dealings, what did the CIA director talk to the president about? What did the National Security Administrator talk to the president about? What is it? I think that what we have now going forward is going to be a lot of noise, a lot of spinning of wheels, a lot of accusations, a lot of bitterness that doesn't, I feel, or fear, imbue to the good of the nation. Let me put it that way.
Sure.
All right, let's talk about the special counsel and what's going on with that investigation. There are two headlines in the Washington Post today, and the first one says, special counsel is investigating Trump for possible obstruction of justice, officials say. The next one, special counsel is investigating Jared Kushner's business dealings. They're looking at his finances and business dealings. Also, Michael Flynn's, Paul Manafort, Carter Page. Why do we know this? These are clearly leaks. There's an investigation going on. We're not supposed to know all of this. So,
leaks.
What do you make of that, Geraldo?
I think that it is really lamentable. Even though I'm a journalist, I think that there has to be some sanctity in the private dealings of the President of the United States. He has to have reasonable confidence that what he discusses with his top aides about the direction of the nation, about national security and so forth, remains confidential. What happens in the room stays in the room. But it is exactly the opposite now. Almost every word out of President Trump's mouth will end up on the newsroom floor of the Washington Post the next day, or sometimes within hours, or even within minutes. It is clear that the president is existing in a very hostile environment. I mean, just imagine if you're Donald Trump today. Outside the White House, you have the offices of the Washington Post, you have some of the best investigative journalists in the world looking to kill you, looking to get whatever dirt they can on you. And what makes it worse is inside the White House, you look around and you're wondering who's going to be snitching me out, who's going to take what I say, exaggerate it, distort it, feed it to a journalist that they know is going to help hurt the president.
But the big
question, very, very distressing.
The big question is whether or not it's even true, because Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein has sent out a message, and it sounds like this is in regards to the Washington Post thing. He says, Americans should exercise caution before accepting as true any stories attributed to anonymous officials, particularly when they do not identify the country, let alone the branch or agency of government with which the alleged sources supposedly are affiliated. Americans should be skeptical about anonymous allegations, as these are. The Department of Justice has a long-established policy to neither confirm nor deny such allegations. And then the President of the United States has just tweeted this.
That's right. He said, after 7 months, this is the President, of investigations and committee hearings about my quote, collusion with the Russians. Nobody has been able to show any proof, and his trademark sad at the end of it. So, I mean, to your point, Geraldo, they're having to point out that you can't just list government officials without even listing what country it's coming from. I mean, these leaks are everywhere, and he's just pointing out the fact that if it's anonymous, how can you trust it?
The problem with that, Pete, is that in many ways, the media is preaching to their own choirs. In other words, Rosenstein cautions skepticism. I guarantee you the people who will be skeptical of these stories or these leaks will be the people who are in favor of the president and on his side. The people who are opposed to the president, they'll
take it as gospel.
Take every allegation, however reckless, and take it as gospel truth. And it will keep the president off balance, I fear. It'll keep him fighting on various fronts rather than working for the good of all Americans. And going forward, he's going to be swatting these backstabbers in many ways. And I think he's really going to have a very embattled. Certainly, I don't see where this ends. You have Mueller, who's a fine, reputable person, highly competent, but he surrounded himself, as I understand it, with people who tend to be more on the progressive side of the ideological spectrum. Their political philosophies may differ with the president and the Trump administration. So what you're going to have is you've got this entity, this funded entity. Now, no one can touch it because it's, to mess with the special counsel is to interfere with the process of justice. So he's going to do what he does, and it's going to spin these wheels, and he'll find a weakness someplace. He'll find a vulnerability someplace, whether it's Jared Kushner, whether it's something that happened in China, whether it was Moscow. I don't know what it is, but look, Scooter Libby never thought that he was going to be the target in Iran-Contra. He had nothing to do with Iran-Contra, and he's the one guy that went to jail.
All right. Geraldo Rivera joining us from the windy city of Chicago on this Friday.
I'm sorry it's such a bummer.
No, I know.
My daughter is graduating here today, so that's
congratulations to her.
It's a good reason.
What school?
Northwestern with honors.
Awesome.
That's right.
Great.
It's great.
Yeah. Love it.
All right, Geraldo, congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
All right, coming up on this Friday, despite this week's shooting, that play depicting a President Trump lookalike being assassinated is still being performed in New York. But should it?
Yeah, right around the corner in Central Park. Plus, an ESPN host says the NFL injects politics in sports by, get this, playing the national anthem.
Oh, yeah.
Really? We've got more on this next.
Well, the show will go on. A play that shows the assassination of a President Trump lookalike will still be performed here in New York City this weekend, despite the targeted shooting of Republicans at that baseball practice in Alexandria, Virginia. Our next guest is calling for the show to be canceled. Daniel Henninger is the deputy editor of the Wall Street Journal editorial page, and he joins us right now. Why should they cancel it?
Well, they should cancel it, Steve, because the show, I mean, it happens at an obviously inopportune time. We've just had an attempted political assassination in Virginia. And I think that the people who are putting on programs like this, it's of a piece with Kathy Griffin's severed bloody head of Donald Trump. I mean, there's something going on here that I call political disorder syndrome. And that what it suggests is it's not just that politics has become intense. The emotions beneath politics have become very intense.
Right. For instance, the shooter who tried to kill as many Republicans as he possibly could before those hero cops came in. Do you think he was insane, crazy, or just so motivated by the harsh rhetoric out there he took action into his own hands?
Well, I think there's a combination of things going on there. I mean, we live in a world with social media in which a lot of it is driven by emotion, and a lot of it has become political. People in politics understand that you can drive emotion now on both the left and the right. And so individuals get wrapped up in their world of social media, Facebook, Twitter. They're online all the time. They're brainwashing themselves. Same thing happens to people from Islamic State, the terrorists. They go online and they whip themselves into a frenzy. And I think what happened to Hodgkinson is that he was full of anger, and what we know is that political violence can become very attractive and mystical. People can just trigger and snap. And I think that is what has happened with Hodgkinson, and everybody in the political community has to understand what is going on here, that people are getting up on the emotional edge and in a place that's very dangerous.
Absolutely. And so when you see things like Kathy Griffin with the head and this here in New York with Shakespeare and the Donald Trump look-alike, you have called on them to quit the show, but they say, you know what, the show's going to end Sunday anyway.
Yeah, and they say it's an allegory on democracy. I mean, let's be clear. This is not an allegory about a historical figure. The character in their play is the current sitting president of the United States.
It looks just like him.
And I have to say one more thing, Steve. All of us lived through the Obama years, 8 years of the Obama presidency, worried about the possibility of an assassination attempt because emotions were tense back then. We were so thankful to get through it without that happening. And now you have this event in Virginia. Now you have a play depicting a presidential assassination. And surely it's time for people putting on stuff like that to pull back and say, we don't want to participate in an atmosphere like this.
Yeah, well, they're not going to pull the show because the show will go on until the end of its run on Sunday.
I'm afraid so. It's unfortunate.
It is indeed. All right, Daniel Henninger from the Wall Street Journal, thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve.
All right. Next up on the rundown, an incredible show of unity at last night's congressional baseball game down in Washington, D.C. But is it going to be back to politics as usual shortly? You know, Judge Jeanine has a lot to say about that, and she is on deck next. But first, here's the Charlie Daniels Band performing live in the summer concert series.
We start with some headlines right now and breaking overnight. Russia taking credit for killing the leader of ISIS. The country's defense ministry claims Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi and 30 ISIS commanders died in an airstrike in the Syrian city of Raqqa late last month. But the top U.S. military spokesman in Baghdad tells Fox News they have no evidence to support Russia's claim. Fox News confirming the Pentagon has not yet decided whether to send more troops to Afghanistan. Defense Secretary Jim Mattis considering sending up to 5,000 soldiers to help train and advise Afghan forces fighting terror. There are nearly 10,000 stationed there right now. Earlier, General Stanley McChrystal weighed in. Take a look.
The reality's tough there. And the way ahead won't be easy. I believe it's doable, but I have one opinion. The American people need to be informed. We need to discuss it, and we make a decision when we have resolved.
The rumor is...
McChrystal says he isn't sure increasing troops will turn the tide in Afghanistan. In just a few hours, the president heads to Miami, expected to announce changes to Obama-era policies with Cuba. Commercial flights and cruises to the island will likely still be allowed, but travel restrictions could be tightened. Kellyanne Conway joined us earlier to explain.
Our unity is with the Cuban people, not the oppressive Cuban regime that has benefited from these changes in the Obama administration policies that helped the military, the security, and the intelligence entities there benefit from U.S.-derived funds. That has to stop, and that will stop.
The president is trying to block business deals with Havana's military in hopes of cutting off money to the oppressive Cuban regime. Back to you guys.
Thank you. All right, Democrats and Republicans uniting in a moment of prayer at last night's congressional baseball game. But how long will the bipartisanship last?
Let's talk to the host of Justice, Judge Jeanine Pirro. She joins us live. Good morning to you, Judge.
Good morning.
It was great to see what happened last night as both sides came together. You know, so many people are saying it would be great if this lasted, but can it?
You know, I like nothing more than seeing Americans come together, and we rarely see that. We see it in times of war. We see it when something horrible like this happens. But, you know, the cynical side of me says, I'm not so sure this is going to last. But I differ from my friend Geraldo, who thought that who said earlier that maybe it has to do with the investigations and all that. I think it stems from the top. I think when elected leaders, congresspeople, people we look up to, people that we vote for, say this president is not legitimate, when they say things like his cabinet, he and his cabinet, they're scumbags, when the resistance is a traitor, everything, but that the resistance is something we all have to do. Well, what does it mean when you resist? It means you fight. We're not resist, conjures up an image of something rather violent. And I don't even need to bring in Kathy Griffin, Shakespeare in the Park, which, and we'll come up with, we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But make no mistake, this is, and I prosecuted murder cases my whole career, this is a guy who is responsible. But it's not just a lunatic. This is a guy who was very focused on Republicans, very focused on Trump, very hateful, and his rhetoric was acceptable until the leaders come out and say, you know what I said was wrong. What I said was not appropriate. We respect the president. Until that happens, I don't suspect there's going to be change.
And this morning we've mentioned Ted Nugent on the conservative side saying, hey, I'm going to tone down my rhetoric because it's important that we all do that. You mentioned violence. Or the portrayal thereof. Shakespeare in the Park here in New York City, a violent portrayal of the killing, effectively, of our president. You hit the street to ask some people about that.
Yeah, well, you know, I was curious as to whether or not, in light of what's happened, whether or not people were still going to see Shakespeare in the Park, whether or not they actually liked the idea of a Julius Caesar Shakespeare play where the lookalike of Donald Trump is stabbed to death. Red liquid comes out of him. He's repeatedly stabbed. And so I went to Central Park, and I saw people waiting in line, lines of people waiting, and I talked to them.
What do you think about the play itself?
Yeah, I think they always try to push the envelope a little bit, and that's what they're doing.
The Donald Trump lookalike being stabbed to death. What do you think of that in light of what's going on today?
Well, I know it can be very controversial, but there are two sides to every story. It depends on your perspective. But I think
so you don't have a problem with this?
No, not at all.
Do you think it's appropriate they have a basic double of Donald Trump being stabbed to death?
Well, it doesn't matter to me. Trump is the president. I respect him.
If they did that to Hillary, would you be offended?
Yes. Hillary is the bomb.
I just came back from Central Park. Yes. They're playing Shakespeare in the Park, Julius Caesar, where they have a Donald Trump lookalike, and they stab him to death. What do you think of that?
It's just tragic. It's sad that that's what our country is becoming in many ways, I feel.
I mean, what's going on now hasn't gone on ever in the political history. They're trying to assassinate this guy. Everything they're doing is to impeach him.
Complete hypocrisy. It's sick. And look what's happened now. It's encouraging violence against Republicans, shootings. It's going to be more of that.
Will you be waiting in line to see Shakespeare in the Park?
No.
No chance.
Two sides to every story.
Isn't that amazing? And I went back at him. It wasn't in the clip. And I said, what do you mean two sides to every story? And he said, well, you know, the Republicans are just as responsible. They do things like that. I said, tell me, when have we held the president's head and, you know, when have we killed him, stabbed him? He couldn't come up with anything. Sure. This is an ideological split that is going to be very difficult to mend. And my concern is that the people who are not grounded, the lunatics out there who just want to kill somebody, are going to use this as an excuse and say, you know what, I'm justified in killing this person. He's not my president. Elijah Cummings, think about it. He comes out and says he's not a legitimate president. Well, what Constitution are you reading? And, you know, at the end of the day, I mean, hopefully something good will happen and Steve Scalise will get better and, you know, we'll move on. But based on Shakespeare in the Park, after the shooting, I question.
Well, that's you asked that in the break. Is this really after the shooting?
Yes,
it was.
It was yesterday, and I said to them, in light of this shooting, do you still think it's appropriate? They waited in line. I couldn't walk the length of the line unless it was Hillary. It shows you the ideological.
All right, we can
rift.
see more of that on your show this weekend.
Tomorrow night.
Good deal.
Thanks, Judge.
Thanks, Judge.
Thanks.
Well, he's the tight end for the Baltimore Ravens, but Benjamin Watson says his best job is being a father of 5. Look at his beautiful family. He says he's got the playbook. Every dad needs to follow, and he's going to join us live next.
Good morning to you.
Come on.
But first, Charlie Daniels performing In America. That's
but
right.
don't go anywhere yet. You got to still watch the show. We got Charlie Daniels singing probably his most famous song at the end of the show.
That's right.
But
has to do with the devil going down to Georgia.
You're burying the lead. We have Jillian.
That's
with
right.
the headlines.
Yes.
Jillian, I don't know if I can compare to him, really. But good morning to you guys. Thank you very much for that bit of flattery there. And good morning to you. Let's start with this right now. New fears the death toll in the London apartment inferno could rise above 100 as dozens remain unaccounted for. At least 30 people are confirmed dead at this point. This as we learn of one quick-thinking mother who saved her family by flooding their apartment with water, keeping the area damp until help arrived. Experts say the high-rise was a disaster waiting to happen, and that the building prioritized green energy over safety. A state of unresponsive wakefulness. That's what doctors say about the condition of Otto Warmbier, the American student just freed from North Korea. That update coming as Otto's father thanks the Trump administration and takes a shot at Obama for not securing his release sooner.
Do I think the past administration could have done more? I think the results speak for themselves.
We're also thankful to Rex Tillerson and to President Trump. They wanted Otto home, and I believe, Cindy and I believe they made this happen. So we're thankful for that.
Doctors still don't know the cause of the 22-year-old's condition or if he will recover. And politicizing patriotism. Get this, an ESPN host says the NFL has made sports political by playing the national anthem.
Colin Kaepernick also did not go looking for a protest. It came to him. He was asked to stand for the national anthem. You do not have to stand for the national anthem, and even if it was a rule that you did, is that Colin Kaepernick injecting politics into the NFL? No. That's the NFL injecting politics by playing the national anthem and putting pressure on you to stand for it in the first place.
ESPN's Max Kellerman comparing Colin Kaepernick's season-long protest to Muhammad Ali refusing to go to the Vietnam War. That's a look at your headlines. And with that, I know we have someone on the couch now who can give a pretty good opinion on that.
That's right. Joining us right now is the author of the New Dad's Playbook and NFL player down in Baltimore, Benjamin Watson. Benjamin, good morning to you.
Good morning.
What did you make of that last story that the NFL is injecting politics into the situation by playing the national anthem?
Well,
that's politics.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if many people know this, but there was a time when the national anthem was not played. Well, players weren't there when it was played. So 5 or 6, 7 years ago or so, players, we were actually in the locker room, and then some things happened overseas, and we wanted, I guess the NFL wanted to do this and brought players out. So politics, I don't think so. I think being a citizen of this country, the national anthem is something that we all stand for, we all recite. You know, we learned that as kids. So I wouldn't say it's politics, but you have to understand that he's right that you don't have to stand, but being an American, I think we all should want to if possible.
Inside the locker room, has there been any controversy about the national anthem, or do players just say, hey, this is my country, I love it, I want to stand for it?
Players respect the right not to stand. This conversation has gone on and on since it happened last year, and so players respect the right, no matter if you agree with everything that he agrees with, that Kaepernick agrees with. We all respect his right not to do that, but as players, we also understand that, you know, this is our country, and if possible, we want to be proud of it. The reason why he's not standing is not because he's anti-American, I don't believe. I think he just wants to improve some things that are happening in this country.
Well, you're not just a football player. You are a husband and a father to 5 beautiful children. You just wrote this book. I think you can give a lot of good advice after 5 kids, right?
Yeah.
Why did you write this book? It's called The New Dad's Playbook.
Well, actually, it was my wife's idea. So after like our 3rd kid,
Good
she
man.
said, exactly, it's my wife's idea. After like our 3rd kid, my wife said, you know, you need to write a handbook for dads as they enter fatherhood, because dads don't know sometimes. Some things you don't know until you actually have a child.
Such as when hormones start flying, stay cool, he says.
Of course, because it's a time that's stressful for everybody. It's stressful for your wife because her body's changing, hormones are changing, she's going to have a baby. It's stressful for you because you want to get her out of the pain that she's sometimes in. And so that time can create conflict. So the whole point of the New Dad's Playbook is to equip men so that they can parent and they can be fathers and support their women from a place of understanding and power.
Benjamin, what's the biggest mistake guys make when it comes to the moms and the kids?
The biggest mistake, at least I made, was thinking that I couldn't make a mistake. I'm someone that doesn't want to make a mistake. I want to fix everything. Sometimes it's not about fixing, it's about listening. Sometimes when there's morning sickness, it's not about figuring it out, although I do talk about how to curb some of that morning sickness in the book, but it's about coming up behind her, holding her, empathizing with her, and supporting her in that way. So sometimes men got to just listen and not try to fix everything.
Where'd you learn this?
My wife. We're going on 12 years, and I learned a lot by trial and error. And so I'm at a point now where...
so you made a lot of mistakes.
Of course I did. Of course I did. But the great thing is it's opening up conversation. So even in the locker room, being around guys all the time, I've had conversations with men who are entering childhood for the first or maybe the second time, and they've actually read the book. Men do read sometimes. So my hope is that this book is kind of a what to expect when you're expecting for guys, and that the women who are bearing our children will benefit from the knowledge that we have.
I got to ask you, big season coming up. How you feeling on your recovery?
I'm doing well. I actually made it back on the field from minicamp, my 14th minicamp. Can't believe I just said that. So I tore my Achilles last year, if you don't know. So It's been a long road. But my kids, my family has prayed for me every day. So being able to go back on the field was kind of like a victory, really, for all of us, just to be able to go out there and participate.
Very cool.
Yeah, because your wife's like, you better get out there on that field.
Well,
You've been at home too long.
Well, she had to take. Well, you know, when you have an Achilles, you're incapacitated for a good. You can't do much for a good month. So she was taking care of 5 kids plus a grown husband that was acting like a baby, and so we're all happy. I mean, you know, it's fun. I still got a long way to go, but hopefully, when training camp comes around, I'll be ready to compete and contribute to our team winning games.
Good stuff.
Benjamin
Thank
Watson.
you very much,
Thank you so much.
The new dad's playbook. Thank you.
Coming up, we are having breakfast with friends in Miami Springs, Florida, where the president is headed today. So what do people there think of his performance so far? We're going to check in with Todd Pyro next.
But first, here's the Charlie Daniels Band performing How Great Thou Art.
Thank you kindly.